There's nothing that can make my heart melt more than a beautiful R&B guitar. But if you want to have a guitar melody in your beat, you definitely have to use a real guitar. No VST is able to get the authentic sound of a real guitar. So in this video I want to show you how I approach R&B guitars and how you can make them yourself. Just a disclaimer, I'm assuming you know at least a little bit about music theory and it's not your first time holding a guitar. If you're an absolute beginner, you can watch my first guitar tutorial, and when you understand these concepts and can apply them, you should be ready for this video. Also, I'm not going to show you how to play any songs or melodies. I want to show you important concepts and kinda explain my thought process when making these melodies. So many of you wanted to know how I get my guitar tone, and honestly I don't do anything special, like at all, but I'll still show you exactly what I do. So let's start with the tone for the electric guitar. This is a Slick SL57 and I don't have any analog guitar pedals, amps or anything. The signal goes directly into my interface. For the pickup I pretty much only use the first or the third setting. I don't really like the sound of the other settings. For these two tone knobs, I don't touch them at all, I just keep them so they don't do anything. The only knob I'll use is the volume knob to obviously adjust the volume. And yeah, then the signal goes into my interface. This is a Complete Audio 1 interface by Native Instruments. And then pretty much the only thing that I use to get my guitar tone is Guitar Rig. The problem with Guitar Rig is that there are so many presets and honestly most of them suck ass. But yeah, so that you don't have to go through the presets, let me show you my go-to presets. So when I want a really clean sound, I'll use the Acoustic Shimmer preset. I always turn off this EQ because it really unnecessarily boosts the lows like crazy. For a more R&B-ish sound, I really like the Basic Jazz and Jazzy Chorus preset. They are both pretty similar, but the Jazzy Chorus obviously has this more modulated chorus-like sound. And if I want a bit more dark and atmospheric kind of sound, I also like the Water preset. If I want that wah guitar sound, I usually use the funky Auto Wah preset. I like to adjust the amp and turn down the presence and the preamp a bit, so that the guitar sounds less amplified and make the high end a bit softer. If I want the same kind of vibe but make it a bit more atmospheric, I also really like the Doppel Wah preset. And if I want a very atmospheric, texture-like guitar, I use presets like Acoustic Multi, which just makes it really big and atmospheric. Filtered Raum is pretty cool. It adds like this synthesizer kind of layer to your guitar. And I also like Underwater Ripples, which gives this bubbly-like texture. And then of course I always add some EQ to take out unnecessary low end and shape the sound a bit. And the rest of the effect chain is always a bit different from project to project, depending on where I want the guitar to sit in the mix, for example, or what kind of sound I exactly want. So I usually add some reverb, delay, chorus, flanger, whatever to just achieve that sound that I want. But yeah, like I said, the main tone comes from Guitar Rig. Next, for my acoustic guitar, this is an Ibanez with nylon strings. I don't know the exact model of that guitar. I've had it since I was a kid, so this is like easily over 12 years old. But yeah, when I record the acoustic guitar, I keep it really simple. I could actually plug this into the interface, but I really prefer to record it with my microphone, because especially for R&B, you really want that close up and intimate kind of sound, and you just get that much more easily with a microphone when it picks up like all the noises of your fingers on the strings and all the slaps and stuff. The mic I have is a Marantz or Marantz, I don't know, MPM 1000. It's just a really cheap mic that I bought a while ago just so I have a mic. If you don't have one, you can just use your phone. It kinda sucks for the workflow, but it still works. I keep the processing on the acoustic guitar very simple. I don't always use Guitar Rig, but when I do, I use the Acoustic Shimmer or Acoustic Multi preset. The most important thing is equalizing, taking out some low and high frequencies, and especially adjusting it to the characteristics of your room. Since you're recording it to a mic, you'll also have like a bit of room reverb and stuff. And in my room, for example, some of the low frequencies are very amplified, which I obviously don't want in the recording. So I gotta work against that by pushing these frequencies down a bit. But yeah, that's gonna be very different for every room. So just get used to your room a bit and see what works for you. And then again, depending on what sound I want, I might add some other effects like reverb and delay. I also use this Mellowfy plugin sometimes if I want a more gritty, vintage kind of sound. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But now let's finally get to playing something. So the first question for chords is obviously, what kind of chords can I even use? I don't want to get too deep into it. Like I said, you'll have to know at least a little bit about music theory. But the way I think about it is I always think in minor scales, and I pretty much just memorize which chord I have to use for which scale degree. So I know the 1, 4 and 5 chord are minor chords, the 2 chord is a diminished chord, and the rest are major chords. And the thing for R&B is that we want to use more soulful chords, and you get that by extending the chords. And the most simple way to do that is by turning the chords into 7 chords. So for example, if we're in the key of A minor, these are the chords that we'll have. A minor 7, B half diminished, C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, and G dominant 7. So now you know what chords to play, but how do you play these chords? Let's start with the easiest and also most important chord shapes. You will use these like at least 90% of the time. These are pretty much already enough to play whatever you want. So if you don't know any chords, these are the ones to learn. For all the chords I'll show you, the root note will always be on the lowest string. So first of all, we have the minor 7 on the E string. You can also play it like this. We have a higher string as well. I like to play it like this as well, using my thumb for the E string. It just feels a bit more comfortable, I guess. Then we have major 7. You can also play it like this, which is way easier, I think. And then we have the same 2 chords for the A string. So we have the minor 7 like this, and the major 7 like this. And like I said, these chords will already get you very far. Let's make a little chord progression with just these chords. Already sounds pretty nice, honestly, and can be the perfect foundation for a simple melody. But as you probably know, you can extend the chords even further and turn them into 9 chords, for example. We can start very simple by just modifying the 7 chords. So let's go back to the minor 7 chord on the A string. And we can literally just take away our middle finger to add this E instead of the F. The F is the 3rd and the E is the 9th. So like this, we turn the 7 chord into a 9 chord. We can do the exact same thing with the major 7 chord. Just take our pinky off. We can also play a minor 9 chord like this, which is very similar to the other minor 9 chord, but instead of the 5th, we have the 3rd on the D string. And I think it just sounds a bit darker than the other one. We can do the same as a major 9 chord, which looks like this. Here's another minor 9 sound I really love. This is a G sharp minor 9, and this has this really sexy kind of sound, which is because we have the A sharp right here and the B right here, which really gives this tension, but in the chord it sounds really dope. Unfortunately, you can't move this shape around because you have this open string right here, but you could use your index finger to also get the B string, which also adds the 11th, I guess, the C sharp, and then you can move it around. It doesn't sound as sexy as the other one, but I always just love shapes that you can move around, so you don't have to learn many shapes to play all the chords. Another minor 11 shape I really like is this one. It's pretty much just a normal minor 7 shape, but you just bring this note down too. I like to use it just as a little variation when I'm tired of using the minor 7 shape all the time. Then there are also so-called shell chords, which are chords that only use the root note, the 7th and the 3rd. The 5th is the same for major and minor chords, so it doesn't really add any tension or like too much melodic information, I guess. So you can just leave it out. And these shell chords are very easy to play. The minor 7 shell chord looks like this. And the major 7 looks like this. What's really nice about these is that the shape is the same for the A string and the E string. So you don't have to memorize a lot to play many chords. What really makes R&B so beautiful and adds all this feeling is when you bring in some more spicy, dissonant chords. I think the most common way to do that is to turn the 5 chord from a minor 7 chord into a dominant 7 chord. So you're borrowing the 5 chord of the major scale and bringing it into the minor scale, which literally doesn't matter at all. You can just memorize that you can turn a minor 7 chord into a dominant 7 chord. So a dominant 7 chord is pretty much just a major chord with a minor 7. Or I guess a minor 7 chord with a sharp third. Really doesn't matter. You can play the dominant chords like this. Or like this on the A string. Or like this. I really love this shape. It sounds a bit more like subtle than the other shape, I guess. And yeah, that's probably my favorite shape for this chord. So let's say we have this chord progression, D minor 7, A sharp major 7, G minor 7, A minor 7. So we're in the key of D minor and our 5 chord is that A minor 7 chord, the last chord. And let's do what we just said and turn the A minor 7 chord into an A dominant 7 chord. And with that we have this spicy tension in the end instead of the normal chord. What you can also do to get that same effect is using a diminished chord on the note 1 semitone below the root note of the scale. So if we're in D minor, we could use a diminished chord on the C sharp. And that's almost the exact same thing like the dominant 7 chord earlier. You pretty much just take away the root note from the A dominant 7 chord. It has the same effect but just a slightly different sound. So let's use the same chord progression again but use the diminished chord in the end. So yeah, I think it adds a bit more tension because we're using the out of scale note as the root note of the chord. What also sounds good most of the time is after using that spicy diminished chord, you can add the diminished chord that's actually in the scale. So you would have this. So you go from the C sharp diminished up to the E diminished, which is actually the second chord of the scale. So yeah, these are pretty much all the chords I ever use, and honestly, I think all the chords I actually know. I'll add a link to a PDF in the description where I'll just put in all the chord shapes so you can download it, print it out, whatever you want to do. And now that we know these chords, let's talk about how we can play these chords in a more interesting way. So knowing all these chords is great, but you can add much more spice and feeling by changing up the way you're playing them. You can, for example, just play the chords like, or strum them, or anything in between. And the way you want to play them really depends on you and your taste. I'd suggest you just listen to songs you really like and see how they are playing the chords. But to spice up your chords even more, you can add embellishments. And your best friends for that are definitely hammer-ons and pull-offs. That way you can pretty much add little melodies on top of your chords. The most basic and most used hammer-ons and pull-offs are definitely in these basic shapes that I showed you. And you can pretty much use the fingers that are not pressing down anything to just hammer on any note you want, as long as it's in the scale, obviously. So instead of just this, you could do something like, or like, The easiest one is probably using that minor 9 chord and just hammering on to get the minor 7 chord. Same with the major. And yeah, you can just bring in any notes you like, any notes you think sound cool. So let's keep that same chord progression going, but add a few embellishments. So yeah, as you can see, that's just a great way to spice up your melodies. One last very common embellishment I want to show you is this, where you basically use your index finger to bar across the 4 high strings and then hammer on with your pinky. And I like to think about that as an extension of the basic minor 7 chord. So this would be a D minor. And you can use that for the 1 and the 4 chord of the scale. So if we stay in the D minor scale, we can use it here for the D and for the G. And yeah, that's just a very common R&B kind of thing. So yeah, that's all I got for the chords. Now for melodies. Melodies are very important to either connect your chords a bit or just to go on top of them and give something memorable to your riff. It's not really easy to explain how to come up with melodies because you pretty much just have to play around until you find something that you like. For that, like in my last video, I like to use the pentatonic minor scale as a bass, but for these R&B melodies I want to add some more to it. We'll keep the pentatonic shape in the first position, but we'll add all the half steps, so we are basically playing the normal minor scale instead of the pentatonic minor scale. Let's go with A minor instead of this. We will have this. So just like with these spicy chords earlier, we want just notes that are close together to add some tension sometimes and give this R&B kind of feeling. In addition to that, we want to break out of this basic shape. You can either learn all the minor shapes across the neck, or you can do it like me and slowly, like I said, break out of the shape and see what other notes work as well. So let's say I'm just playing around a bit. I just want to experiment and see what kind of notes would sound good as well. So I might just slide down here, break out of the shape and see, okay, this note sounds cool as well. So I can use that in my melodies as well. I could slide down even further. This note doesn't sound good, so I don't want to use that. The next note sounds good again. And just like that, I can work my way across the neck and just unlock these notes that sound good and are in the scale. I can do the same sliding up. So that's one way to make your way across the neck and don't be like trapped in this one shape. And then, like I said, it's all about playing around and just finding something catchy. I really like to just loop the chord progression or whatever I already have and play over it for a little while. And as soon as something catches my ear, I will keep that little melody and just try to expand it a bit and make it more interesting. And especially play around with some techniques. You want your melody to stay as simple and catchy as possible, but still make it sound interesting. And you can achieve that by using different techniques to play the same melody. So of course you have hammer-ons and pull-offs again. For melodies I also really love sliding around. I especially love these short little slides like this. For this you'll have to slide to the spicier notes, to the half steps, or even notes that aren't in the scale at all. You'll just have to make sure to stay there for as short as possible. So playing it slowly it would sound like this. But if we play it faster, we just have this beautiful little accent. So yeah, that's really cool. You can also play around with muted notes. The way you can mute your notes is using your hand and placing it right here at the very bottom of the strings. It will feel a bit weird at the beginning, but you'll get used to it quickly. You'll just have to find the right spot where the note is still playing, but it won't ring out. So this is too far on the bridge, because you don't hear the note at all. And Here you're not muting it at all, so you'll just have to find the right spot to just mute the string a little bit, and that just gives a pretty different vibe to the notes you're playing. And another technique I really love for melodies is double stops. I think that's what it's called. And that's where you play two notes at the same time. The easiest strings for these are the B and E string and the D and G string, because they have lots of notes that are in the same position. And yeah, just like that, you can really spice up your melodies. You can keep the melody itself very simple, but with these techniques you can elevate the sound to make it sound way more interesting, but still keeping the catchy simplicity. So let's make a really simple melody. I don't know, maybe like this. But now we can add some techniques to make it sound way more interesting. Let's just maybe use a hammer-on and pull-off for the first note. Then maybe slide into the next one. Maybe add that tiny little slide that I showed you. Maybe add a double stop at the beginning. Maybe mute a few notes. And yeah, just like that, you can play around and find unique, cool melodies that you can put over your chords, or even that you can use to connect your chords, like this for example. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. I think the most important thing after understanding these concepts is just really getting used to it. So you don't have to think much about what you're playing, and you can just freestyle and come up with new stuff every time. I really hope this video could help you. Feel free to ask anything in the comments. I know some of this stuff can be pretty confusing or seem really hard in the beginning, so don't be afraid to ask anything, even if it may seem like a stupid question. I will read and answer every comment. Let me know if I got anything wrong or if you have any other cool tips. And yeah, thanks for watching.